Good afternoon, and thank you for taking time away from your families and businesses to join us for this Epic Insight. We hope your 2021 is off to a good start. This is Brian Lenz, Director of Sales here at Epic Retirement Plan Services, and I'll be your host for today's call, which, as a reminder, is approved for CFP CE credit. So if you did not do so during registration, please send your CFP number and name to marketing@epicrps.com so that our friends at Schwab can submit for your credit. Getting back to the topic at hand, are you aware that by 2030, American women are projected to control approximately 30 trillion in assets, and that women already control more than half of the personal wealth in the U.S.? With that in mind, it should be no surprise that attracting and retaining women clients will be critical to the growth and scale of your businesses going forward. Today, we're pleased to be joined by Laura McDowell, a Regional Director at Schwab Asset Management Solutions, to share their thoughts on how you can best align your practice to meet the needs of women investors. As a Regional Director in the Western region, Ms. McDowell is responsible for supporting the sales and distribution of the Schwab funds, Loudus funds, and Schwab ETFs to RIAs, broker-dealers, and bank trust departments. She's a graduate of the Manhattanville College with a Bachelor of Arts in International Management and Psychology, and has since completed the certificate program in financial planning and is a CFP, as well as a certified investment management analyst. Ms. McDowell is also an accredited investment fiduciary and a member of Women in ETFs, serving on the University Outreach Committee. She holds the Series 7 and 63 licenses. As a reminder, you will be muted throughout the call, but we'd love to field your questions as we conclude today. So please do enter those in the GoToWebinar questions panel. And with that, we will turn it over to Laura.
Thank you so much, Brian, for that warm introduction. Our partnership with Epic means a great deal to us at Charles Schwab Investment Management, so thank you for inviting us today. I genuinely want to thank all of you for the opportunity to engage in this conversation about how we as an industry can better support, engage, and empower a base of investors that arguably has not been inspired and reached by our industry in a meaningful way. The client profile of our industry is shifting, and we are at a really important crossroads. And while I'm eager to dive right in and share several insights with you and actionable steps that you and your respective firms can take to make an even greater impact on your female clients and potential prospects, I also believe it's important to understand a person's why. So I wanted to share why this topic is very important to me. So I grew up in a small town in Massachusetts with about 4,000 residents. Neither of my parents are in financial services. One was in education, the other was in warehouse management. But my parents taught me important money values at a very young age, teaching me the value of a hard-earned dollar as they put me to work at the ripe old age of 8. And they taught me how making smart saving and spending decisions now can provide more freedom in the future. Yet we never really spoke about investing or really what our family's money situation was. And it was somewhat ingrained in me that it's not really right to talk about money. Fast forward to college, I ended up double majoring, as Brian said, in psychology and international management. And at a career fair my senior year, I was offered a paid internship in financial services. And paid internships were hard to come by. But coming off an internship with the Commission on the Status of Women, an NGO with the United Nations, let's just say I wasn't really headed in the direction of corporate America. So until I was part of this industry, I didn't really think of investing as a way to participate in the growth of the economy or how businesses fund growth. For a really long time, I thought investing was a form of gambling and only for the wealthy. I didn't know that the true heart of this industry is really about helping people maximize their hard-earned money so that they can live a meaningful life, whatever that means to them. My first day in the industry at the age of 21 was the day I learned the difference between a stock and a bond. Everything I learned about investing, I learned on the job. And I've come to realize through countless conversations that the story is not unique to me. That frame of reference I had about financial services and about investing is way more common than one might think, and most especially with women. Women in every demographic, in every life stage, pull me aside at a gathering or an event to ask me questions about steps they should take as it relates to their financial life because they feel overwhelmed or potentially misunderstood as it relates to the financial support that they are receiving and the financial information they are consuming. On the other side of that coin, undeniably, more and more women are becoming our sole clients, and not just through joint households. Through high earning jobs, through starting and selling a business, the list goes on and on. So your success as an advisor literally depends on your ability to help transform this mentality many women have about our industry, about what we do and who we do it for. As a woman in this industry, the fact that we aren't making enough progress really breaks my heart because I have a firsthand and insider perspective of how valuable and essential our work is to women in helping to create opportunities for wealth creation and retention. And I know from countless conversations how engaged women want to be, but haven't necessarily felt that they could be. There is no doubt that we are in the middle of a big change to economic, social, and cultural norms that we really cannot ignore. McKinsey published a great report last year titled Women as the Next Wave of Growth in US Wealth Management, citing an unprecedented shift in assets by the end of the decade. I hope some of you have read it. If not, it's certainly worth the read. So let's look at the numbers. Baby boomers today control roughly 70% of investable assets of American households, with 2/3 of those assets in households with a male-female partnership. Given research has shown that women outlive men by an average of 5 years and tend to marry men who are roughly 2 years older than they are, in my personal case, 3, generally joint household assets are largely passed to the surviving spouse. So as baby boomer men age and pass away, more women than ever will be in the sole control of arguably one of the largest wealth transfers in our lifetime. That is a financial power shift that we haven't seen before. And I know the stats might be different across channels, but research shows that still 70% of women switch their wealth manager within a year of wealth transfer. So if we do not continue to evolve in how we reach and empower all individuals, especially those underserved by our industry, we are missing a massive opportunity, especially with women. So I have 3 main objectives for our discussion today. First, I'd like to highlight several important findings from the vast body of research that has been done on women investors to set the foundation of our discussion. Second, I'd like to address how generational, unconscious, and gender bias can create roadblocks with female clients and prospects instead of being identified and thwarted to create more meaningful engagements with your clients, their families, and your prospects. And third, Schwab is fully invested in the success and growth of our industry and your firms, and strongly believe for advisors and asset managers alike, women represent a huge potential for not only new investable assets, but they can also be incredibly strong centers of influence and referrers. I will share our learnings as an organization committed to helping women create meaningful investing success and a framework for helping your firm move forward in your client gender diversity efforts with practice strategies to help your organization attract and retain female investors. There is no better place to start than where women stand. So it shouldn't shock you to know that currently women control approximately 51% of personal wealth in the US, or that women make up half of the workforce. On top of those powerful numbers, over 80% of consumer spending is currently controlled by women. But some of you might be surprised to learn that nearly 44% of women say that they are the primary breadwinners in their household. And not to mention, more women than ever are making or taking part in the majority of household financial decisions. This in combination with the baby boomer wealth transfer equates to potentially controlling 30 trillion in investable assets in the next decade. This is not to say that women are on a level playing field quite yet. Unfortunately, we are still far from it, and progress has been a little slow. The data is still showing that women on average are 25% less likely than men when it comes to their financial picture, and less confident than men when it comes to their financial picture and understanding. The largest contrast we've seen in the data between men and women is fewer women having an emergency fund and fewer women rebalancing their portfolios. Given the strong standouts last year and the leadership changes we've seen in the market since late fall, I'm sure we can all agree that not rebalancing a portfolio could have lasting effects. And this is probably no surprise for many of you, but the data is very clear in that younger women tend to be less constrained by gender stereotypes, with the largest magnitude showing upwards of 70% of millennial women saying they take the lead on financial decisions, compared to 40% of baby boomer women. I can tell you from a personal perspective, my husband and I definitely feel less constrained by traditional gender stereotypes. We absolutely divide responsibilities, of course, but they don't necessarily fit into a traditional gender framework. Definitely less so than I observe with baby boomers. But when I think about it, I grew up with completely different social norms and laws than my mom, for example. I purchased my first home when I was 29. Completely on my own and before I was even married. But then I think about my mom when she was that same age, and my mom needed her dad or my father to co-sign in order for her to get a credit card, simply because she was a woman. She wasn't even able to apply for credit on her own until 1974. And that is shocking to me. So of course, her generational experience and my unique generational experience form a completely different lens in how we move through the world. How could it not? It's so interesting to me though, because everyone loves talking about millennials. And if I'm being honest, I will sometimes kind of pick and choose what cutoff I reference, depending on how millennials are being depicted, because I'm technically a millennial. But when we really drill down into it, the data we've laid out here makes a clear case that widowers and Gen Xers will be the ones who inherit first. So let's take a minute to explore some of the ways that women investors tend to differ from men. It's been well documented that women tend to invest for the long term. They tend to diversify their assets, invest based on facts, and limit trading. I'm sorry, but when I think about an ideal client that I want to work with, I have to admit a lot of those traits come to mind. I think there's a really important lesson in this research that women need to hear. Women are generally hardwired with tendencies that really work in our favor when it comes to investing. Yet research continues to suggest we tend to lack confidence in investing compared to our male counterparts. But imagine if every woman walking into your office or walking into a planned participant educational meeting that you might be hosting was told right before she walked in, did you know that women tend to be better investors than men? In fact, some research suggests that women's returns tend to be nearly 2% higher. Imagine the effect that such a simple mindset shift could have on that woman, regardless of her investing knowledge. She stops and thinks, hey, I'm built for this. Maybe she wasn't feeling confident about her investing knowledge walking into your office, or maybe she was feeling overwhelmed walking into the planned participant meeting, or maybe she felt like she didn't have the capacity to tackle all of this right now. All that could shift with a new frame of reference. Cognitive framing could really have a profound effect on female clients and prospects. So I'd really encourage you to try and use some of these techniques and see if you can leverage that difference that it can make in shifting the initial confidence levels and comfortability with your female clients. And while it's important to have the context of generational differences that have been reported among women, or to understand the investing tendencies of women that tend to work in our favor, All of this research does not mean that we should make assumptions about an individual woman's knowledge of investing, her goals and priorities, and whether she personally feels overwhelmed about her current financial situation. I know I've been talking in generalities, but let me be perfectly clear. Women are by no means a monolithic group. We all navigate this world in a unique and different way from one another, regardless of gender. The way I process information and the lens in which that information gets digested is completely unique to me. And the way Brian, for example, processes information is unique to him. So we must focus on the whole person and not jump to conclusions based solely on one's gender, which really makes it all about reaching the individual. One of the big hurdles we need to work through when we think about reaching the individual is managing unconscious bias. At Charles Schwab Investment Management, we actually have developed a roadmap for helping advisors and their clients identify behavioral biases. Our CIO of equities actually holds a doctorate in decision sciences. So the bias lens is one we are acutely aware can provide powerful insights in our asset allocation work. And when we think about how behavioral biases can work against us when it comes to investing, similarly, unconscious bias or implicit biases can work against us when it comes to connecting with people. Unconscious bias are social stereotypes about certain groups of people as a way for our brains to categorize the social world. Our brains need to process immense amounts of information quickly in order to do this. Our brain creates mental shortcuts that help to ease that cognitive burden. Brian, I just saw my video screen go out, so I want to make sure that you are still able to hear me.
Yeah, I didn't want to interrupt Laura. The audio was getting a little bit choppy, so I turned off the video to clear that up and did the trick. So
Perfect.
Sorry to everyone, you won't be able to see Laura anymore, but you're coming through loud and clear now.
Perfect. Excellent. Thank you, Brian. So these shortcuts often lead to biases because we extrapolate what we know to be true in a given situation to other situations that may seem similar but are not. Biases are somewhat inherent in how our brain can move through the world at a pace that information is thrown our way, and everyone has them. What can differentiate an exceptional advisor and a competent advisor is not the performance of the portfolios they manage, but the ability to identify the unconscious biases that they have so that their interactions with all of their clients and prospective clients lead to more meaningful connections and understanding between themselves and the person they are trying to reach. I thought it would be helpful to share a few experiences and personal insights as it relates to unconscious bias. I am hoping everyone on this call who reads Women All Have the Same Needs knows this to be untrue. However, surprisingly enough, this unconscious bias rears its ugly head even with those that would say, of course that's not true. Asking conversational questions and not transactional questions can really help you avoid this trap. Instead of making assumptions about her needs, ask about what goals she hopes to achieve as it relates to her financial well-being. Instead of assuming she has kids or wants to have children, ask who are the most important people in your life and does your relationship with them affect any of your financial decisions? While thankfully no one has ever said to me that women know less than men, I've had countless financial interactions when the person helping my husband and me spends the majority of their time speaking to my husband instead of speaking to me. Thankfully, my husband is just as aware of this and has said on many occasions, if you want us to work with you, you better start speaking directly to her because she's the one making the call on this one. I cannot stress this enough. It is so important to be mindful about spending time directing your words and your eye contact equally among men and women during meetings or conversations when you are conversing with the joint household. This is a good practice to have in any situation, including internal work meetings. This creates a sense of involvement, inclusion, and responsibility. Directing questions and eye contact to men and women equally in a client meeting is a great way to ensure you are doing your best to thwart this bias. Even if you think she doesn't want to be involved, there is a reason. So instead of assuming that reason, make a more concerted effort to get her engaged. Eye contact and conversational questions is a really good place to start. No research study has ever shown that women need simplified financial information. It's simply not true. Hopefully, Schwab Center for Financial Research strategists like Lizanne Saunders and Kathy Jones, among countless others in our industry, prove that to be utterly untrue. Yes, research has shown that women might lack confidence, but never competence. With that said, I do believe that we could all do a bit better of a job when it comes to reaching those that might have different learning styles. I am a visual learner and an auditory learner, for example. It's very helpful for me when learning to be able to talk things out or to be shown visual examples. I'm not a reading writing learner, so I can personally vouch that oftentimes not being that type of learner has made it unnecessarily difficult in this industry, given so much of what we consume in financial services has historically been through the written word. Providing personal examples or analogies can be really helpful. Videos on your website or creating podcasts and using imagery, for example, if you're trying to rein in current overspending habits, asking someone to visualize themselves for 15, 20 years from now with a really descriptive and almost tangible image of what that would look like and what they'd be doing is really powerful imagery for a visual consumer of information. Unfortunately, I have way too many examples for this one over my career, and thankfully they are fewer and fewer these days, but more often than not, if it is myself and another man walking into a meeting or hosting a meeting, the assumption is made that he's more senior. Ultimately, what that kind of says internally to me is that, you know, I know little or nothing about what we're about to meet on. And people will go for his hand first for introductions and spend more time getting to know him in the introductory small talk, and then start firing away questions all in his direction, only looking at him, only for him to defer to me. And it doesn't feel good for me. And I'm guessing it doesn't feel good for the person that made the mistake either once they realize it. I do truly believe that 9 out of 10 times it was unconscious. I don't believe that every man or even woman that has done that believes that I couldn't have been the expert. Unconsciously, though, that bias showed its ugly head. And if I wasn't so forgiving, like some prospects might not be, it honestly could have been a costly mistake for that relationship. You know, this one there's literally a word for this, mansplaining. So what I like to kind of get people centered back on is listening. Listen is actually an anagram for silent. Every individual wants to be heard. They want to be seen. In order to be heard, you have to listen. If I walk out of a meeting where I talk less than 30% of the time, I've learned a lot about that person and their unique needs. I would argue that your agenda needs to really be 90% their agenda. And there's nothing wrong with saying, after listening to them, I want to make sure I understand you correctly, and then repeating what you learned and what you think their expectations of you are. I can tell you that it is much better to do that than for you to potentially get it wrong, thinking you heard something you didn't, and for her to feel like she wasn't heard or seen. I think this last one is probably the fastest way to lose a prospective client, in all honesty. I mean, 44% of women consider themselves the primary breadwinner in the family. 51% of the workforce is comprised of women. And given the demographic shift that's upon us, of course, there very well could be some inherited wealth, but we cannot and should not make these assumptions. I can't tell you how many times this assumption has been made directly or indirectly about me. And when someone makes that assumption, even indirectly, I kind of start singing Destiny's Child, Independent Women in my head, usually channeling my inner diva. But I can tell you every time the conversation usually ends there. Because when this assumption is made about you, you're essentially disregarding the work that someone's put in and the sacrifices that someone's made in order to earn every penny of it. We are all hardwired for connection. So why not make that connection by asking more questions and listening even more? Again, listen is an anagram for silent. Use the intelligence that you gather rather than your intuition, and help others at your firm do the same. We actually have a program called Mindshare at Charles Schwab Investment Management that I'm going to reference further, but it really builds on this, treating her as an individual and building trust. I mean, our industry is built on trust, our relationship with our clients, our relationship with each other. So tell me how we can really build a relationship on trust if we don't get to know each other as individuals on a personal level. When we start showing up more as ourselves at work, like we are at home or with our closest family and friends, that is when real lasting relationships are made with colleagues, but most especially with clients. So get to know her and get to know what really makes her tick. And what I mean by that is what excites her about getting out of bed in the morning and what keeps her up at night, and be vulnerable enough to share back. I have to admit, when someone tells me, I've tried, but she's just not interested in coming to the meetings. The husband is the only one that comes to the meeting. I always say, well, you simply aren't trying hard enough. If at first you don't succeed, try another way. She may have a capacity issue and feels like she doesn't have the time, and only one of them needs to be informed. So find out how to carve out some capacity in her life so she feels she has the time to meet. Maybe you propose going to where she's going to be or meeting at the house. If it's a wife and a husband, maybe you stress the importance of her involvement in case something should happen to him. Demonstrate how you are her blind side. You might need to go deeper and find one of those things that make her tick, her true passion in life, and find what you genuinely have in common and find a way to connect over that shared passion. Also, finding meaningful ways to create multi-generational engagement with your clients is crucial to the success of your business, as that literally is your future client base and your pipeline. For example, do you host events that encourage multi-generational engagement? We have an education program called Raising Money Wise Kids that parents love because it's a fun way for young kids to start learning about saving and spending and investing. Think of ways you might be able to make a more concerted effort to engage with other family members of a household outside of the transactional piece of business, and most certainly outside of the portfolio. I'm sure I don't need to tell this audience how referrals can generate higher growth and revenue potential for firms. That is a given. The majority of advisors we speak to that have been growing organically attribute that strong growth to their firm's really unique and strong referral culture. And even when a client is extremely loyal and a big fan of a particular advisor or firm, asking for the referral can seem a little disingenuous. So referencing before what I referenced, Mindshare. So we have this workshop that we designed for advisory firms, which reshapes the way people have traditionally thought about referrals through a step-by-step process that firms can really leverage to foster the kind of client relationships that lead naturally to referrals over time. The true art of the referral has nothing to do with asking for the referral, but about finding genuine commonalities between yourself and the client or prospect and exploring those. Ultimately finding small moments that make a really impactful and memorable personal touch. So not only are women 25% more likely to make referrals, but they are also more likely to have made a purchase based on a referral as well. So this is really kind of compounding at its finest. So let me give you a recent example of this in action. My husband and I needed to take down a tree in our backyard. We asked around, we looked online, and we found a 2-person team to get the job done at a fair price. While they were taking down the tree, I learned about their families, I learned about their hobbies, and they learned about mine. They even wrote down fishing spots for me to take my dad for his birthday. By the time they left my house, which was just 2 days, they were booked the following week with people I referred them to, and I had given their sign to a half a dozen people all over town. Now, they never asked me for a referral, but I felt a genuine interest in wanting them to succeed because the personal connections I made with them through meaningful conversations, masks and all. So what should have been transactional became personal. Once you've created a relationship that's not only tangibly valuable with good service, but is also meaningfully and memorably personal, those are the key, meaningfully and memorably personal, that is where the referral culture at an organization can really blossom. If you aren't familiar with our Mindshare program, I would highly encourage you to reach out to me or my colleagues about doing a workshop at your firm. But so while we're on the subject of action steps your firm can take to meet this demographic imperative head on, let's talk about some additional practice strategies that you can employ to help drive your firm's gender diversity efforts going forward. If you really want to have an impact with female investors and make progress in your firm's ability to both attract and retain female clients, you need to think about it as a multi-prong approach, with the first prong focused on targeted communication and content. Are you creating content specifically focused on topics that tend to be more top of mind for women? Could you host a workshop or work towards building affinity groups that foster an environment where women might feel more supported and more willing to be open? Another way to move the needle at your firm revolves around training and coaching. This would be for leadership, advisors, and support staff, which are all critical to helping shift a firm's culture towards a more gender diverse client base. Unconscious bias training can be extremely valuable as a training tool. It is a great way to help everyone at your firm learn to identify their own unconscious bias so that they can engage more successfully with female prospects and clients. It can also help one another at the firm call out potentially in an appropriate manner an unconscious bias that someone might not be aware of. And working towards building a more diverse firm over time is another way, of course, that you can move the needle even further. We understand this takes time. And if your firm is not on a hiring spree, think about putting in place a game plan that can help evolve your firm's diversity over time. And what can you be doing personally to help that pipeline? Internships, mentorship, financial literacy in the community. And it's important to remember diversity can be on all levels: gender, race, generational, educational background, or experience. It's not just about hiring women. Not all women want to work with a female advisor, but it is well documented that most people are put at ease when they see a part of themselves represented. The more diversity you have within your firm, the greater the likelihood that someone walking into your office or reading the Our People page of your website is going to feel a connection with someone else at your firm. And given what we know about our workforce demographics, the marketplace and its trajectory of what our client demographics will be like 10 to 20 years from now, plain and simple, you are missing opportunities and greater prospect engagement by not having more diversity within your ranks. We are not optimizing for success as an industry if we aren't striving, even in the smallest ways, towards a diverse and inclusive workforce. I touched on this a bit earlier, but so much boils down to customizing communications. So next time you sit down to write a broad communication to your clients, try asking yourself a series of questions in every communication you put out, and pretty soon it'll be second nature. Am I being inclusive and representative of the clients I work with and want to be working with? Am I including both rational and emotional language when discussing the benefits to what I'm advising on? There are actually writing platforms that scan for gender tone of language that's being used in communication or in a job posting, for example. And they scan for kind of key phrases that are statistically likely to actually change the gender balance of your client communication. That is something tangible your firm could leverage if this is an area where you think you could improve upon. A few other questions that might be helpful to ask. Am I balancing my own desire to focus on the returns of their portfolio with the values their investments symbolize to them? Am I demonstrating the impacts? Am I providing enough opportunities for those that have been less engaged with their investments to engage in a way that might be more comfortable for them? So getting back to our earlier discussion on finding ways to elevate the power of the female referral at your firm, I want you to take a pause and be introspective about the current female clients you work with and relationships you've built with them. If you assess your current client list, which women have you built the strongest relationships with and why? If you have a pen and paper, jot it down. Can you find meaningful ways to connect with them outside of your business relationship or with other women that you don't feel like you've built as strong of a relationship with? Is there a select group of female clients you can leverage to build a feedback loop as to what your firm can be doing more of to reach and empower your female base? Another area worth exploring is segmentation. And a lot of times when I speak with firms, the segmentation is by client assets. However, thinking about segmentation by behaviors or life stage or household situation could create a more meaningful roadmap for the way in which you communicate and connect with those clients. Here's just a sample worksheet template to kind of help you facilitate exploring customized ways to engage with specific clients. Think of 5 to 10 women, and they could be clients or prospects with whom you could engage more actively and record their names. Again, if you have a pen and paper, write them down while they're top of mind and this is fresh. And also note where they are in their lives to help you stay focused on their life stage needs. And then decide on one or more actions you can take to reach out, re-engage, or provide assistance in a meaningful, personal way for each woman you've identified. For any client, but especially female clients who are new to your firm, another key to retaining them and activating them as a center of influence is to onboard them thoughtfully. Besides any research they've done on their own or your potential initial conversation, your onboarding process is really an important first impression of your firm that's paramount to get right. So when we think about onboarding thoughtfully, I hope the first thought that comes to mind is asking a lot of conversational questions, which is hopefully followed by inquiring about their preferences when it comes to communication and engagement. Again, confirm what you hear and listen with intent. Asking about a person's last name is a big one. I personally did not take my husband's last name, and although I am not someone who gets upset if someone calls me Mrs. Hood, I certainly notice when someone gets it right because most do not. Don't assume a married woman wants to be called Mrs. Make it a point to find out because you could get valuable information one way or another. And we already touched on this, but it's important not to assume the man will be making all the decisions. By observing the decision-making process and asking everyone's opinion throughout the conversation, that could lead to even further valuable insights. And even if the man is making most of the investing decisions now, the woman is likely to be making them later. So empower her now. She needs to feel you and she have a genuine trusting relationship that is yours and hers alone. For single women, ask yourself if your onboarding questions are as detailed for single women as they are for men, and make sure the answer is yes. Standardize that. Many women and men are responsible for not only children, but aging parents, both emotionally and financially. So having an understanding of caregiving responsibilities makes it easier for you to make an impact. And if the woman is a widow, how recently did she lose her spouse? If she inherited money, how long ago did the parents pass away? Is she considering or undergoing a divorce? The emotional aspects of transitions and where someone is in that moment in time are just as important to acknowledge as the financial aspects. A lot of times they can actually be more important to that individual. And visual representation. Visual representation is critical to creating a more inclusive environment for women in our industry. Asking yourself if the pictures and illustrations you are using are inclusive and gender balanced, because it can have a profound effect. Do some show women without men? And when women from different backgrounds look at your content, would they feel included and represented? Lastly, it never hurts to hone your ability to communicate and navigate differences gracefully. The stakes are high for financial advisors when it comes to attracting and retaining women clients. So this is not something to take lightly. We can all take steps to change that narrative. I personally think oftentimes a lack of involvement or a lack of understanding about calculated risk leads to this next stat. Investing is one way that women could close the wealth gap we've seen as it relates to retirement accounts, brokerage accounts, and overall asset levels. It's also a way for women to combat the well-researched gender pay gap and combat the hit their finances might take by needing or wanting to step away from their career trajectory, potentially for caregiving responsibilities. So if we think more critically about how we position investing and the framing we use surrounding investing, the collective impact we could have is truly endless. Further research has shown that women are not necessarily risk adverse, but they are just more calculated risk takers. To tie this back to my personal story at the beginning of our presentation, I am not a gambler. It literally makes me sick to my stomach, the thought of losing money. I played roulette once at a conference in Las Vegas. I lost $60 in less than a minute, and I've never gambled since. Yet, if you looked at my current allocation to equities and fixed income, it wouldn't reflect that same appetite for risk. You'd think my appetite for risk was aggressive. But generally, if someone asked me if I was risk averse, my answer would be yes. But I love calculated risk. I tend to stay calm when others are running for the hills because I do my homework, as do most women I know. So I'm confident in my calculation of risk, regardless if it feels like the world is ending. So take the time to educate your female clients. You'd be surprised their potential comfort levels for risk once they are educated on what that really means. I know we've covered a lot in a short amount of time, so I want to kind of leave you with this. The first conference I ever went to, I remember sitting in a breakout session on the topic of female investors. That was over 10 years ago. And the trend line of the research presented on female investors then is all too familiar compared to the trend line that I reviewed with you today. And over that same 10-year period, women's control of personal wealth, their share of the workforce, and the increasing nature of which they are becoming the primary breadwinner of the household have all significantly trended upward. So why are we still talking about this 10 years later and not making the monumental strides as an industry I know we could be? So I challenge each and every one of you to do more. I, for one, do not want to be talking about this 10 years from now. 10 years from now, my hope is our industry will be a case study in a classroom on how an industry was able to make a significant lasting impact on a massive, massive cohort of investors that they had historically been falling behind in fostering impactful relationships with. Arguably a cohort of investors that gained control over 30 trillion in investable assets in that same exact decade. So we want to support all of you in your efforts to be a part of the solution to this demographic imperative by helping you take some of these steps we've outlined today. so that we can have a collective effort to move us forward as an industry. But we aren't just kind of giving you these action items and leaving you to it. At Charles Schwab Investment Management, we aren't just looking to be, you know, kind of a provider of low-cost ETFs, funds, and target date solutions. We truly want to be a partner. We want to be a resource to you. And we have a number of programs for you to leverage, from women in investing to behavioral finance to creating a referral culture to workshops for you to leverage on multi-generational client events. So if you're interested in learning more about any of these resources, please do feel free to reach out. I do want to, you know, personally thank Brian and the team at Epic for the opportunity to speak with you today. And Brian, I will turn it back over to you to see if there are any questions that might have come in the Q&A box, or in the interest of time, to kind of close things out with reminders about CE credits. So we'll take questions if there are any.
Yeah, we'll do both. And thank you, Laura. I hope at the very least that raises some awareness on the subconscious biases that are certainly still out there today. So thank you very much for that. As Laura alluded to, we'll open up to a few minutes of questions. If you have those, please do enter those in the panel now. And while you do that, I'll just run a couple of things by you, Laura. You know, you covered a lot of ground. If you were to kind of highlight a first step or first steps to really to start making a difference in one's practice in this area, what would that be? Where would I get started if I, you know, agreed with everything you said, which is pretty hard not to, and really want to make some changes?
Yeah, so I mean, I really think the first step would be to look inward, right? Look inward at your practice now. You know, kind of fill out that sample worksheet, jot down those names of clients that, you know, are good clients of yours now, or in joint household relationships where you really feel like you could make a better connection with one of the clients that you serve now, right? And identify again some of those ways that that you can create meaningful, you know, conversations with them. So for instance, you know, if you know that a female client in a joint household where potentially the man is more involved than the woman, if you know that she has caregiving responsibilities, reach out, see how her mother is doing or her father's doing that she's caring for. You know, if you know they're going on a family vacation, you know, write a little note with the book about that place. I mean, who's going on family vacations right now in COVID? I'm not sure, but you get what I'm saying, right, Brian? Really dive into, you know, what that person is passionate about and try to connect with them on that level. Because once that connection is made, then that trust is built even further, and you can deepen connectivity. And then I think it can have a ripple effect, right? What you learn to do with your existing clients, you can then spread to the way in which you prospect. You'll think about prospecting differently. I think that is a really good first step. The second, I would say, is definitely assessing how you are positioned, you know, in your respective market. The website is a good place to start. Again, are you being inclusive? Are you showing, you know, both families on your website and single women on your website? You know, if you're going after that clientele and that's an area that you want to work with. I think those are two, not easy, but those are two good first steps.
No, thank you for that. Another thing that really resonated as you said it was the meaningfully and memorably personal connection. I think that is extremely important. Male, female, doesn't matter. It's just flat out important. Do you have any hacks related to that, or kind of the same concept? How does one even take the first step in changing a mindset from more transaction oriented to connection oriented?
Yeah, so I mean, I think there's two ways to do that. One is in language, right? And I talked a lot about I probably mentioned a few times in the presentation, kind of transactional questions versus conversational questions. And the way in which you think about that, transactional is, why are you here with me today? Right? Or what do you want to get out of this relationship, this partnership? That's an easy, this is what I want to get out of it, right? But a conversational question is really opening that up. When I say words like money, wealth, investing, how does that make you feel? What if that resonates with you or what doesn't resonate with you, right? I mean, that starts a conversation of how someone really feels about these concepts, right? And again, what does success look like for you? Instead of that question that is, a little bit cold and transactional, go to the conversational piece, right? In 10, 15 years from now, how do you envision yourself living, right? What are the most important things or characteristics that you live by, right? What are your underlying values that you live by? Is financial security one of them? Is family one of them? Is competition what gets you going, right? What gets you out of bed? So that's the kind of language, I think, difference we need to start using to really open up, again, to your point, with men and women. But I do think women need that more to feel that trust. So I think that is an important component to that. In terms of the memorable touches, it really comes down to sitting down with a pen and paper and figuring out what makes people tick. Sometimes it's their kids, sometimes it's their pets, sometimes it's a specific charity, right? Sometimes it's caring for a family member, right? I mean, sometimes it's a son or daughter sports team, sometimes it's their alma mater. Whatever it is, figure out those things that really get them going, not just their likes and interests and hobbies, but again, those things that really energize them, and find a commonality, right? We don't want to pretend to be something we're not, right? If you don't like sports, I don't want you bonding over sports, right? I want you to find those areas of commonality. If your pet is your baby too, that's what you bond over. So those are the meaningful touches I think we need to spend a little bit more time focused on to really build that connection and really open up the power of referral and connectivity outside of just that one person that you're working with.
Oh, great stuff. Thank you, Laura. That will wrap it up for today. So as I said, thanks again to Laura McDowell and to Schwab. And of course, thank you all for joining us for this Epic Insight webinar. As a reminder, the session is approved for CFP CE credit. So if you did not submit your CFP number during registration, please email marketing@epicrps.com with that number, and we will take care of getting it to Schwab's to submit on your behalf. We'll also send you a copy of today's slides as a follow-up, and certainly wish you safety and health as you support your families, colleagues, and clients. And please don't hesitate to contact us if there's anything we can do at Epic RPS to support you. Have a great evening, all. Thanks again, Laura.
Thanks so much, Brian. Appreciate the opportunity. Hope everyone stays healthy and safe.
Take care.